Greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of Anime Recap. Today we will be going through the classic 1986 anime, Fist of the North style. Set on a post-apocalyptic Earth after a nuclear war, and follows a warrior named Kenshiro, the successor of a deadly martial art known as Hokuto Shinken, which gives him the ability to kill his opponents by striking their secret vital points, and often results in an exceptionally violent and gory death. Before this video starts, if you guys enjoy these recaps and breakdowns, then make sure to check out my Ko-Fi page as well as my merch store. Your support will be appreciated. And so without any further ado, I hope you enjoy this video and let's jump straight into the recap. After a long time traveling through the desert, Kenshiro is taken prisoner while wandering into a village looking for water. There, he shares a cell with a young thief named Bat, and befriends an orphan girl named Lin, who was assigned as his cell guard. Shortly afterwards, a biker gang attacks the village and their leader, Zed, takes Lin hostage. Ken breaks out of his cell and kills Zed using the Hokuto Haikuretsu Ken technique, rescuing Lin, and as he leaves the village, Bat decides to follow him as his self-appointed sidekick. Lin stays behind and the elder of the village tells her that, wherever Hokuto Shinken goes, chaos follows. Kenshiro rescues an elderly farmer named Smith from Spade, a member of the Four Jacks under the employ of a mysterious warlord known only as King. The old man seeks to deliver a bag of rice seeds to his village, hoping to harvest them for the future, and Ken and Bat take Smith back to his village, unaware that Spade and his men are following them. Spade, having lost his eye during his initial encounter with Ken, attacks the village and kills Smith in retaliation, and enraged by his death, Ken finishes Spade with the Hokuto Zenken technique, which gives its victims 7 seconds to repent their sins before dying a gruesome death, and after the battle, Ken plants Smith's seeds over his grave. Bat spots Lin in a truck full of captive villagers being taken to the town of Dorado, which is occupied by members of King's organization. While in Dorado, Kenshiro encounters 2 of the remaining 4 Jacks, Diamond and Club, who are torturing and killing the villagers for fun, and he uses the power of Hokuto Shinken to destroy them both, and with Bat's help, is reunited with Lin. Kenshiro learns that the other prisoners transported with Lin are being held in a separate prison camp in a nearby valley and manages to break the imprisoned villagers free. But they are all killed in an ambush led by Mr. Hart, the last of the 4 Jacks. While he excess flesh proves resistant to his attacks, Ken eventually uses the Hokuto Juhazen technique, which allows him to overcome Mr. Hart's defenses and strike one of his pressure points. From his battle, Ken deduces the true identity of King, having learned that he is none other than his old nemesis Shin, a master of the Nanto Seiken style, and remembers how a year ago, Shin defeated him in combat, engraved the 7 scars on his chest, and took his fiancée Yuria, who agreed to live with Shin under the condition that Ken's life would be spared. He arrives at a castle where Shin was said to be staying, but Shin has already left for his new capital city, Southern Cross. Ken only finds Shin's right-hand man Joker, who sets the castle ablaze with Ken inside. But he manages to escape, swearing to find Shin and take Yuria back. Kenshiro, Bat and Lin arrive at an oasis city under the rule of God's Army, a fanatical military group composed of former Special Forces members, and he has a bounty placed on his head after he kills one of the group's security officers in a fight. God's Army conducts a full-scale manhunt for Kenshiro, and when the search team starts executing innocent bystanders at random to lure him out, Ken allows himself to be captured in order to infiltrate their training facility. There, he faces and defeats the Army's drill instructor. Kenshiro penetrates the headquarters of God's Army and confronts their leader, the Colonel, a deluded follower of Shin who has mastered a Nanto Seiken style known as Nanto Myoken. However, he proves to be no match for the power of Hokuto Shinken, and Ken ultimately kills him by hitting a pressure point that causes the Colonel's skeleton to explode out of his body. Kenshiro and his friends arrive at a village where the young men and women are being offered as slaves to Madame Patra, an evil sorceress who controls the village's water supply from her fortified castle. After defeating her bodyguards, Ken confronts her, but she disappears in a blinding flash of light, and when he explores behind the castle, he discovers that the lake has completely dried up. Kenshiro follows the dried-up riverbed and ventures into Patra's lair at Dragon God Mountain to save the young villagers. There he faces Patra's partner, Drago, a fire breather with the power of Nanto Ryujinkan, South Star Dragon God Fist, who attempts to coerce Ken to his side, but he refuses. The latter tricks Drago into killing Patra and then causes Drago's throat to constrict, consuming him in his own flames just as Drago and his castle burn to the ground and the villagers are freed. Kenshiro and his companions meet Taki, an old friend of Bat's who takes them to his home village where Auntie Toil, an elderly woman who takes care of orphaned and abandoned children, is trying to dig a well. However, the warriors' biker gang led by Jackal have trailed Ken and his friends, waiting for the opportunity to claim Toil's village as their new turf. After Toil is murdered by Jackal, Kenshiro leaves Bat and Lin to watch over her orphans while he pursues Jackal and the warriors. While searching for clues to Jackal's destination, Ken encounters Fox, Jackal's right-hand man, but he outwits and kills him and finally catches up to Jackal. But before Ken can kill him, he is rescued by Joker. He chases Jackal to the ruins of Villainy Prison, where only the most vicious of criminals are imprisoned. Hoping to defeat Ken, Jackal releases Devil's Rebirth, a gigantic demon-like killer who has mastered the forbidden art of Rakan Nyoken, Arhut Deva Fist. Jackal dupes him by pretending to be Devil's brother and tricks him into believing that Ken was responsible for his imprisonment. But Ken defeats the giant, and then uses one of Jackal's own sticks of dynamite to destroy them both. Kenshiro and his friends visit a village where the local doctor, Duran, offers his hospitality. However, Duran is a former member of a group of bandits who have been dispatched by Shin to hunt down Ken, and their leader, Dante, blackmails Duran into killing Ken under threat of divulging his shady past to the villagers. Duran attempts to kill Ken at the edge of an active volcano, but fails, and is murdered by Dante and his men when he tries to protect a young girl. An enraged Ken kills Dante's men in retaliation, and, when Dante tries to use his Nanto Hyakuzenkan, South Star 100/Fist, style against him, Ken overpowers the villain and forces him to walk straight into the volcanic magma. The group later arrive in a city that is being controlled by an insane priest called Zarya. Under orders from Shin to kill Ken and his friends, he uses his strange hypnosis technique involving the city's cathedral bell to turn the villagers into mind-controlled zombies before he kidnaps Lin and forces Ken to fight his way into the cathedral where she is being held captive. Zarya hypnotizes Ken and reanimates his dead fighters. However, tears from Lin fall on Ken, breaking the spell, who then destroys Zarya and the bell, freeing the city's inhabitants. Kenshiro and his friends find themselves caught in the middle of a turf war between two rival gangs, the Scorpions led by Baron and the Snakes led by Junk. Joker orders them to unite and kill Ken, but Baron instead tries to recruit Ken to his side. However, he refuses to support Baron as the two gangs fight it out, and eventually, after both sides almost wipe each other out, Ken kills the remaining gang members and uses a technique that forces the two leaders to embrace each other before their bodies explode. Shin gathers his entire army for a meeting as he officially declares war against Kenshiro, while Barkam, the general of Shin's army, tells his men how Ken defeated some of Shin's best fighters. Meanwhile, Yuria recounts to her young maid Saki about how she became Shin's captive and his subsequent rise to power. Kenshiro and his friends encounter Jennifer, a female motorcyclist, and that helps repair her motorcycle, and she invites them to her hometown of Gina. However, Shin's Demolition Corps and Speed Racers find Ken's location and begin to destroy the town. Ken reveals himself and kills the Demolition Corps' leader Wolf, but the Speed Racers abduct Bat and Lin during the battle. He later defeats them and rescues the two, but the Speed Racers' leader Goraz uses a tank to attack them until Ken destroys it with a series of powerful hits, killing Goraz. Meanwhile, at Southern Cross, Yuria unsuccessfully attempts to escape with Saki's help. Kenshiro and his friends are ambushed in the desert by the airborne Blackbirds commanded by Mahari, and the Gold Wolf forces led by Gareki. In Southern Cross, Saki's elder brother, Temjina, is punished because Saki helped Yuria, but later escapes to tell Ken of its location. Mahari and the Blackbirds attack Ken and his friends while Gareki and the Gold Wolf forces prepares to attack Gina, but stop for a 3-hour break. Ken eventually destroys the Blackbirds and the Gold Wolf forces, killing both Mahari and Gareki, while Temjina finally arrives to give Ken clues to the location of Southern Cross and Yuria, just before he dies from injuries inflicted by Shin's men. Kenshiro proceeds towards Southern Cross with his companions until they encounter Commander Hidora and his armed buggy force, but manage to wipe them out and continue on their way. Shin receives news that they are getting closer and sends out the South Star Cannon train commanded by Toda. Jennifer rides out to intercept the train, but is killed by a cannon blast, and a furious Kenshiro then attacks and commandeers the train, driving towards Toda's base, a battleship stranded in the desert. He crashes the train and kills Toda. However, General Barcom and his airborne forces arrive and bombard the battleship before he then reports to Shin that Ken has been killed. With Kenshiro presumed dead, General Barcom leads a mutiny against Shin, seeking to take all of Shin's territory for himself. In the desert, Joker searches the wreckage of the battleship for Ken's body, unconvinced that he is actually dead, and the latter emerges from the wreckage and Joker challenges him. But Ken is too powerful and kills him. Meanwhile, in Southern Cross, Shin defeats and kills Barcom. However, chaos ensues and the various gangs fight among themselves, causing the destruction of the city. As Southern Cross is left in ruins following the mutiny, Shin is alone in his palace, protected by the few followers still loyal to him until Kenshiro confronts him for the first time in a year, and despite Shin's best efforts, Ken is able to defeat him in their rematch. However, he then learns that Yuria ended her life in an attempt to end Shin's obsessive compulsion with continuing his destructive path in order to win her heart. Shin then ends his life by jumping off the roof of his palace, refusing to die from Kenshiro's technique, and the other reunites with Bat and Lin and buries his former friend, ending a major chapter in his life. Kenshiro rescues some villagers who are being chased by the vicious Fang clan, and he becomes the guardian of their village after he meets their female leader Mamiya, who bears a striking resemblance to Yuria. Elsewhere, a man named Rei, master of the Nanto Suichoken, South Star Waterbird Fist style, is killing bandits while seeking the man with the 7 scars. Rei is hired by the Fang clan to infiltrate Mamiya's village as a spy, where he meets Kenshiro and his friends. However, drawn by Mamiya's charms, he switches sides and becomes the village's other new guardian. Ken and Rei both later realize that they are masters of opposing styles, and meanwhile, the leader of the Fang clan seeks revenge for those who have been killed. Mamiya's younger brother Ko is captured by the Fang clan while collecting strawberries for her birthday, and after he is publicly executed outside the village gates, Kenshiro and Rei set out separately to punish those responsible. They meet a group of Fang clan members and, after they kill them all, Rei reveals that he is searching for the man with the 7 scars, whom he believes killed his family and abducted his sister Eri. Boss Fang, the leader of the clan, swears revenge against the killers of his men, and Jibara seeks revenge for his slain brother Kemida, while Boss Fang orders his right-hand man Gojiba to find information on Kenshiro and Rei's families. Meanwhile, Ken, Rei and Mamiya venture into Night Fog Valley in order to confront the clan in their hideout, and after he learns about Rei's sister Eri, Boss Fang abducts her from another group of bandits. Gojiba leads the clan on a raid to another village and abduct the young people, but their clan beast, Madara, goes wild and has to be subdued. Back at Boss Lair, the hostages are sacrificed to serve the dead clan members in their next life. Kenshiro, Rei and Mamiya arrive and are challenged by Madara, but Ken defeats him, and Boss Fang reveals that he has Eri, Rei's long-lost sister, but she doesn't recognize him until he gives her the wedding veil he has carried with him for years. Mamiya pretends to be Kenshiro's fiancée and allows herself to be captured by Boss Fang under the condition that he releases Eri. However, he does not keep his side of the bargain and forces Ken and Rei to fight each other to the death for the safety of the women. Although they appear to kill each other, they both survive and prepare to challenge Boss Fang. After they rescue the 2 women, Boss Fang sets off a series of explosions, separating them and threatening to kill the women. However, Ken and Rei defeat the clan and rescue everyone. After returning to Mamiya's village, Ken restores Eri's eyesight, and she reveals that the man who kidnapped her wore a metal helmet, while elsewhere, a vicious gang leader with 7 scars on his chest is terrorizing a village, claiming to be Kenshiro. Ken suspects that the man with the helmet is one of his Hokuto Shinken brothers and leaves the village to find him. He then learns that Jaggi, a former brother in training, is trying to tarnish his reputation, and in a flashback, Ken and Jaggi are shown competing to be the Hokuto Shinken's successor until Ken tracks him down to the village where he is committing numerous heinous acts and prepares to confront him. Jaggi separates a pair of young brothers from each other as a punishment, and the younger one, Aki, is chained to a giant rock and forced to walk into the desert, while the elder one, Meiko, is programmed by a Hokuto Shinken technique to kill Kenshiro. Ken comes across Aki and takes him back home, where he frees Meiko from Jaggi's control and then heads for the headquarters, where Jaggi has just killed one of his own men for seeing his disfigured face. Kenshiro comes face to face with him in his hideout, and the latter reveals that he's been trying to tarnish Ken's reputation in retaliation for an earlier altercation between the two that ended with the disfigurement of Jagi's face. In combat, he tries all sorts of underhanded tricks to gain leverage against Kenshiro, but the other overcomes all of them, and Jagi reveals that he was the one who convinced Kenshiro's former friend Shin to betray him and steal Yuria away. Angry at this revelation, Ken unleashes an ultimate technique which puts an end to Jagi once and for all. Ken continues his journey, having learned that his other two brothers who trained in the ways of Hokuto Shinken have also survived the apocalypse. He hears rumors that one of them, Toki, a once benevolent healer who sought to use Hokuto Shinken as a healing art, is now using his skills to experiment on people and create monsters in the Village of Miracles. On his way, he is attacked by 3 beastmen whom he defeats, the last telling him that it was Toki who made him that way. Meanwhile, Lin leaves the village to find Ken and becomes lost in a sandstorm causing Bat, Ray and Mamiya leave to search for her. Ken confronts a group of people hunters who were physically modified through pressure point experiments, and defeats several of them before he continues on his way with Mr. Hobb, leader of a group of hunters. Meanwhile, Lin is found by a group of nomads and begins traveling with them. One of the nomad children falls ill and they decide to take him to the Village of Miracles to be cured, and Lin goes with them. They meet Toki, who, although he saves the boy, plans to use his parents for his experiments. Kenshiro reaches the village and confronts him. However, Ken is unconvinced that his adversary is the real Toki until he reveals the scar on his back that he received while rescuing a young Ken in the past. Kenshiro attacks Toki, who is surprised by his speed and power, but still manages to immobilize Ken. Fortunately, Ray and Mamiya arrive to help, revealing that the man Ken is fighting is not the real Toki, but an imposter named Amoeba, a jealous rival who sought to destroy Toki's reputation. Amoeba gloats that he is a genius and has imprisoned Toki, but Ken defeats him with a Hokuto Shinken technique that forces him to walk off the roof of his fortress, and before he dies, Amoeba reveals that he was following orders from a man known as Keno. Kenshiro tells the others about the sacrifice Toki made to save him and Yuria, and why he must find him. Mamiya seeks clues to the real Toki's whereabouts and learns that he is imprisoned in the dungeon of Cassandra. The City of Wailing Demons. Ken sets off, followed by Mamiya while Uyghur, the warden of Cassandra, learns of his approach. Uyghur adds to Kenoa's martial arts collection by imprisoning a man with a secret scroll and his family. Meanwhile, Kenshiro's group are attacked by the Cassandra assault squad on their approach, and Uyghur blackmails a female prisoner named Bella, the successor of the Ranzan Kuranaken, Crimson Orchid Mountain Fist, style, to kill Ken under the watchful gaze of Targel. Ken defeats Bella, but spares her life, causing Targel to kill her mother as punishment for her failure. Bella challenges Targel, but she is no match for his Kakusho Jujiken, Black Palm Cross Fist, style, and dies. Ken and his companions double back to avenge Bella, killing the guards and Targel. News of Targel's defeat reaches Cassandra and Uyghur. Raiga and Fuga, the twin giant successors of the Nishin Furaken, dual gods of wind and thunder fist, style, are the gatekeepers of Cassandra, and after years of destroying anyone trying to enter without permission, they decide to quit, but the merciless warden Uyghur forces them to continue. After they are beaten by Kenshiro, they decide to join him to free Cassandra even at the cost of the life of their brother-at-arms, Mitsu, and they break open the giant doors as Ken finally faces off against Uyghur. The two fight it out in the prison's courtyard, and Uyghur attacks Ken with his Taizen Ryu Sojobin, Mount Tai twin streak whip style, but the latter ties them in knots. Uyghur then immobilizes Ken with his Taizen Ryu Senjobin attack and knocks him into the graveyard, and although apparently beaten, Ken recovers, defeats Uyghur, knocking him into the grave, and the City of Wailing Demons falls silent. While awaiting Kenshiro's return, Bat and Lin reminisce about their adventures with Ken and the people they met up until this point while somewhere else. Kenoa's royal guards arrive at Cassandra to regain control of the prison. With Raiga and Fuga supporting Kenshiro, whom they call their savior, the prisoners join the revolt, but Kenoa's royal guards arrive to restore order. Ken defies them, and the prisoners attack the royal guards while Ken and his allies fight their way into Cassandra to find Toki. Raiga and Fuga become trapped by royal guards and are then confronted by their Nishin Furaken master, Sajin. They declare that it is their destiny to fight their master, and they manage to kill him while Ken, Rei and Mamiya go to Toki's cell, encountering the royal guards Zarka and Kashin before killing them both and eventually reach Toki. Ken finds Toki, waiting for him at the top of the tower, but he is suffering from terminal radiation sickness due to having made a great sacrifice to save Ken and Yuria during the nuclear war. As they leave, the tower begins to collapse and they are attacked by Kenoa's suicide squad. Raiga and Fuga encounter Bulg, leader of the squad, and sacrifice their lives to allow Ken and his companions to escape before the tower collapses. Toki reveals that Kenoa is none other than the eldest of the 4 Hokuto brothers, Reo. As the group prepare to leave, their way is blocked by Bulg and the remainder of the squad, but they are no match for Ken and the angry inmates of the prison. As Kenshiro and Rei travel together, Ken recalls his time competing for the Hokuto succession with Reo. They come across a village devastated by his assault squad and learn they are headed for Mamiya's village, so Rei goes back to protect Eri and Lin. Toki reveals more about Ken's past to Mamiya, and after she leaves, she is cornered by Reiwa's reconnaissance squad, but is saved by Ken. Meanwhile, Reiwa's invading army has started attacking Mamiya's village. But Eri and Lin are saved from capture while Kenshiro, Toki and Mamiya are attacked by Reiwa's mobile bike squadron, and after Ken defeats them, they find a trail of huge hoof prints left by Reiwa's horse, Koko. On his way to the village, Rei finds Bat, who tells him of the attack on the village. Meanwhile, the invading army forces the villagers to swear allegiance to Keno by being branded, killing those who refuse. However, Lin is captured while hiding Eri and defies them, but is saved by the arrival of Rei before she can be sacrificed. He fights the assault squad and confronts the leader of the invading army. Meanwhile, Kenshiro and Mamiya stop at a bar so that Toki can rest. But the inhabitants are members of Reiwa's special forces. After defeating them, Ken goes on alone to catch up with Reiwa while back in the village. The assault squad tried to capture Eri, but spurred on by Lin's courage, she gains the strength to fight for herself again while Rei goes on to defeat the invading leader, only to come face to face with none other than Reiwa himself. He challenges him, but he proves to be no match and is mortally wounded, and Kenshiro, emboldened by Rei's sacrifice, challenges Reiwa. The two brothers engage in a deadly battle, creating a tornado with their conflicting auras. However, the fight is interrupted when Rei fires an arrow at Reiwa, who then hits one of his pressure points, Shingshu, and declares that Rei now only has 3 days to live before all of his blood hemorrhages out of his body, while Ken is weakened by a severe blow to his chest. Reiwa tries to defeat Kenshiro before Toki arrives, but the latter intervenes, revealing that Reiwa was responsible for the death of their frail master and adoptive father, Ryukin. Believing that Ken is not ready to fight, he paralyzes him and challenges Reiwa himself, advising the fallen to learn from his technique of avoiding and deflecting direct attacks. However, Reiwa pins their feet to the ground with a trident and uses his superior strength and power to overpower the ailing Toki at close range. Mamiya goes to intervene, but Rei stops her, saying that it will end in her death and that he loves her. She fires a crossbow bolt at Reiwa, but Kenshiro manages to break free from Toki's paralysis and intercepts the arrow when it's returned. He and Reiwa then fight again, with the latter using techniques stolen from masters he imprisoned in Cassandra to the point where they're both too wounded to continue and Toki separates them. The battle ending in a stalemate. Reiwa's army desert him, and he rides off on his black stallion Koko. As a result of the injuries Reiwa inflicted upon him, Rei has only 3 days left and symptoms of disfigurement are already beginning to show. Mamiya ventures into Medicine City by herself to search for a cure to ease Rei's pain. However, Gaff the Ruthless, dog-loving canine master, rules the city, and just as she finds the medicine store, Mamiya is captured by him until Kenshiro and Rei arrive. The two rescue her, but when she later tries to find the right medicine in the warehouse, she encounters Zorage, who throws balls of acid at her. Rei goes to Mamiya's aid and deals with Zorage, while Ken disposes of Gaff, and later, Rei discovers a UD mark tattooed behind Mamiya's shoulder, which the mark of Yuda, the self-described lover of strength and beauty. Yuda learns of Reiwa's battle with Kenshiro and calculates what opportunities may present themselves for him. Ken and Rei learn from an elder that Mamiya was once kidnapped by Yuda, who also murdered her parents, and Rei reveals that Yuda is in fact one of the 6 sacred fists of Nanto, along with him and the deceased Shin. The two go to Yuda's castle to confront him, but only find his vice commander Dagar, who once put under pressure, says that he has gone to the city of Blue Town. Degar suffers in agony from the injuries inflicted on him by Kenshiro, while the two approach Blue Town. They are attacked by a young group of rebels, but their leader, Nova, asks for assistance in rescuing their female friends and family from Yuda. They free the women, but find that the Yuda at Blue Town is a decoy and the real once is revealed to have been hiding in his castle all along, and he kills Dagar to implement his deception. Kenshiro and Rei return to Mamiya's village, with Rei on the verge of death as he sees the death omen star adjacent to the Big Dipper constellation of 7 stars becoming brighter. To exact revenge against Rei, Yuda orders his agent Komak to lead a raid and abduct Mamiya while Rei accepts Toki's offer to push a pressure point on his body that will increase his strength and extend his lifespan by 1 more day, but at the expense of enduring great pain that causes his hair to turn white. Yuda's troops attack the village and the giant Goyen keeps can engage while Mamiya is taken captive. However, Rei emerges even stronger than before and rescues her, although Mamiya reveals that she can also see the death omen star. Yuda and his gang arrive at the village and again take Mamiya captive to force Rei into a match with him, and he reveals that he has harbored resentment towards Rei ever since they trained together, due to the fact that the latter's graceful Nanto Suichoken was more beautiful than Yuda's own Nanto Kokakuken, South Star Crimson Crane Fist style. After losing the fight, Yuda signals his men to destroy a nearby dam and flood the village, turning the ground beneath them to mud. With the two fighters' lower bodies stuck in the swirling water, Yuda has a slight advantage thanks to his upper body style, while on the other side, Kenshiro attacks Komak and the men who destroyed the dam, and stops the flow of water. Back in the village, as the water level drops, Rei overcomes and mortally wounds Yuda with his ultimate technique, leaving him to accept his defeat, and recognizes Rei as a stronger and more beautiful man before he dies. In the last few moments of his life, Rei says goodbye to Mamiya and seeks seclusion in a cabin away from his sister and friends as he reminisces over his adventures with Kenshiro and his companions whilst awaiting death with dignity. He dies alone, screaming in agony, and after that, Ken sets fire to the cabin with Rei's body still inside, cremating him and swearing to keep his legend alive. With Shin, the star of martyrdom, Yuda, the star of betrayal, and Rei, the star of justice, now dead, only 3 of the 6 sacred fists of the Nanto Seiken remain. Kenshiro leaves Lin and Bat with Mamiya and sets off alone to find the remaining ones until he arrives at a town and finds the inhabitants being mistreated by soldiers under the command of a man named Souther. Souther has proclaimed himself the Holy Emperor, seeking to conquer the world by the century's end and using innocent children as slaves to build a pyramid-shaped mausoleum, which he boasts will stand as a symbol of his greatness. Somewhere in the desert, Reo reflects on the growing power of Souther and his own desire to rebuild his empire, just as Souther's hyenas prepare to capture Bat and Lin, but they are saved by a stranger. In a small village, Kenshiro discovers that the hyenas are kidnapping children to work on his mausoleum, and when another tries to kidnap kids, he rescues them only to be surrounded by more hyena troops. They are decimated by rebels led by the blind martial artist Shu, one of the 6 sacred fists of Nanto Seiken, who challenges Ken, but the latter proves to be too strong and defeats him. Bat and Lin intercede and explain that Shu saved them, and Ken offers his hand in friendship. He joins Shu in his resistance against Souther and his men, led by Belga, who are still kidnapping children, and Lin offers to act as bait so the two can trap and kill them. Something Shu says, however, reminds Ken that he once fought in the South Star Dojo as a child. Watched by Souther, Reo and Shu, he challenged Kenshiro at that time, but although Shu won, he protected him from the others, blinding himself as punishment for not killing the promising young boy and awakening his own star of benevolence. When Jay, a young member of Shu's resistance, is killed, Ken goes to protect his fiancée Ami at Suani village from Galzas, one of Souther's captains. He arrives only to find that Galzas' men have already invaded it and abducted the women and children, so he rescues them, killing Galzas and avenging Jay's death. Shu's rebels intercept one of Souther's food convoys, but they soon realize that the food has been poisoned while Kenshiro finally comes face to face with Souther. However, he first has to deal with the 2 assassins, Peijai and Giji, exponents of the Nanto Sozenkan, South Star Twins slashing fist style. After defeating them, Ken faces the Holy Emperor, but although he strikes him with fatal blows, Souther appears to be immune to his Hokuto Shinken techniques. He is eventually defeated and captured, Badly wounded and bleeding, however, Shu's young son Shiba sets off to infiltrate Souther's lair and save him, even at the possible cost of his own life. Meanwhile, Ken is to be used as a sacrifice for the completion of Souther's Holy Cross Mausoleum until Shiba manages to rescue Ken and they escape into the desert, but are found by Souther's troops. Rather than let Ken be captured, Shiba sacrifices his own life to save him. Ken is found by Ryoa's men and treated, but he is then rescued by the rebels and returned to Shu's base. However, Souther has located their base and, after an initial surprise attack, he moves in with a battalion of his forces. Shu sends the unconscious Ken off to safety with Bat and Lin while he remains to fight Souther and his troops. However, the latter uses his hostages to forestall Shu, then incapacitates him by severing the tendons in his legs, rendering him helpless. Souther's troops invade the rebel base, but Ken senses Shu's struggle and revives enough to begin to fight back. He emerged from the tunnels and regained his strength while intimidating Souther's troops, and on the other side, Shu is forced to carry the apex stone that will serve as the summit of Souther's Holy Cross Mausoleum. Toki and Ryo become aware that Kenshiro is about to confront Souther again, and head towards his domain while Shu continues to painfully carry the huge stone to the top of the pyramid until Toki and Ryo attack Souther's troops. Kenshiro arrives at the Holy Cross Mausoleum and witnesses Shu's public execution before Toki and Ryo also arrive at the scene to witness Ken's fight with Souther. As Shu arrives at the peak of the pyramid, he miraculously regains his eyesight and sees the now-adult Kenshiro before being crushed to death by the apex stone. Before accepting Ken's challenge, Souther recalls his tragic childhood, his rejection of the need for love and his motive for building the Holy Cross Mausoleum. Kenshiro fights him again, firstly using Shu's technique, out of respect for his dead friend. Souther opens a secret room in the mausoleum, revealing the body of his master, Oge, and Ken uses his Hokuto Shinken, but it seems ineffective against him until he finally learned the secret of Souther's invulnerability. During their fight, Ken realizes that his enemy's heart is on the right side of his body and his pressure points have also been inverted. This enables Kenshiro to strike using his Hokuto Shinken, and Souther uses the ultimate technique of his Nanto Hoken, South Star Phoenix Fist, style as a last resort. Ken is able to fight back, eventually dealing a fatal blow, and the dying Souther joins his late master inside the mausoleum as the pyramid soon collapses, taking Souther with it. The children rejoice at Kenshiro's victory while Ryo leaves, still intent on his own plans for conquest. Koryu, Ryuken's former rival, sends Zenjio to report on Ryo's activities. Meanwhile, Ryo impatiently waits to regain his full strength in seclusion. Kenshiro still believes that Toki was the true successor of Hokuto Shinken and recalls the sacrifice he made to save him alongside Yuria and many others during the nuclear holocaust. After Zenjio reports to Koryu that Ryo has recovered, he decides to seal his fists according to the succession principles, and at the same time, Toki also resolves that Ryo must be stopped. To gauge his strength after his recovery, Ryo challenges Koryu in a battle to the death and emerges victorious. Koryu's sons try to kill him, but he is too powerful and easily defeats them, but lets them live. Meanwhile, Zenjio tells Kenshiro and Toki of Ryo's intentions, so the two fight to determine if Toki is strong enough to defeat Ryo and Ken wins. Nevertheless, Toki prepares for a death match, fulfilling his own destiny to die as a martial artist, fighting the other adopted son of Ryuken. He takes Ken, Bat, and Len to his hometown and shows them the gravestones for him and his brother. Ryo arrives and reveals that the two are siblings and how they met Ryuken after their parents died. Ryuken only wanted to adopt one child, forcing them to compete for the position, but Ryo helped Toki, and they were both adopted. The battle begins, but the two appear evenly matched even with their different tiles. Toki appears to gain the upper hand, however, Ryo eventually prevails, tearfully defeating his brother. He then leaves, rejecting his Ryo persona and again becoming Keno. Ryuga visits the graves of Shin and Yuria. Meanwhile, Keno returns to reclaim his territory, in which some of his former lieutenants have become even more brutal than he was. One group has the misfortune of encountering Ken, who stops them from mistreating the townspeople. He then meets Ryuga, a martial artist and servant of Keno, whose astrological sign of the solitary star Sirius is neither part of Hokuto nor Nanto. Ryuga punishes the former troops, reclaiming the territory for Keno, and when the latter returns to claim his throne, Ryuga requests permission to challenge Ken. Keno surveys his territory and praises him for his loyalty. However, Ryuga is inwardly critical of Keno and his tyranny after he witnesses Kenshiro's compassion towards others. He becomes determined to find out which of the two Hokuto brothers-at-arms is more fit to lead in the new world. Kenshiro goes to the aid of a village where the people have been forced to steal from other villages to feed the greedy bandit Sabat, and after watching his behavior, Ryuga challenges him to test his strength. But Ken is unwilling to fight back, although Ryuga is determined to fight the man whom his sister Yuria loved. He clears a village of bandits, claiming it for Keno, but he seems disinterested in governing until Kenshiro arrives, and Garu, Ryuga's second-in-command, challenges him, but is no match for him. He reveals that Ryuga has gone to attack Toki just as the other severely wounds him to provoke rage within Kenshiro. Ken travels to Ryuga's castle and forces his way inside, determined to save Toki, finally accepting Ryuga's challenge, and quickly gets the upper hand. After he injures Ryuga, Toki intervenes, telling him that Ryuga had already committed seppuku and rebandaged himself in preparation to die during the fight. As he lays dying, Ryuga says that he once believed that Keno was the one to bring order to the post-apocalyptic world, but now he believes that Ken is the one to lead humanity into the future. With his last breath, Ryuga reveals to Kenshiro that he was Yuria's brother, and shortly after, Toki finally succumbs to his radiation sickness and peacefully passes away with Ryuga's body in his arms. While holding a funeral for the two, Kenshiro recalls where it all began with his old nemesis Shin, the man who engraved the 7 scars on his chest and kidnapped his beloved Yuria, and his journey with all the other warriors that led him to this moment. Ken, Bat, and Lin continue their journey and find themselves at a village ruled by a follower of Keno named Bugle, a man obsessed with washing who has monopolized the town's water supply for himself. And although Ken rids the village of Bugle, the people remind him that there is still danger while Reo remains as the tyrant. Rihaku, leader of the Nanto 5 Chariot Stars, orders Hayui and his motorcycle-riding Wind Brigade to begin attacking Kenoa's outposts. Meanwhile, Kenshiro encounters one of Kenoa's enlistment groups and infiltrates them to find the group run by the ruthless but cowardly David, who uses Glenn the Killer Machine, a man he raised only to fight. After Ken defeats Glenn, he renounces his evil ways, only to be betrayed by his master David, who orders his men to kill Glenn, and as David and his men flee from Ken, they are slaughtered by Hayui and his Wind Brigade. He then challenged Ken to a sparring match, but is outclassed and leaves wounded. At the capital of the South Star, the mysterious last general of Nanto prepares to oppose Keno while Hayui launches a war campaign against him and his troops and succeeds in luring Keno out to face him. But he is no match for and is killed with a single strike, leaving his brother Cheyenne to carry the terrible news to the capital of the South Star. On hearing of his brother Star Hayui's death, Shuren vows to avenge him and burns down his own castle as a funeral pyre, leaving him and his Crimson Army with no home to return to. Meanwhile, Morgan, the chief of Kenoa's vanguard force with terrible driving ability, has Bat's buggy destroyed for passing him on the trail. Kenshiro follows him to the town, which is under Morgan's brutal control, first taking care of his men, and then confronting Morgan himself, who tries to escape, but crashes because Bat had earlier sabotaged his vehicle. Elsewhere, Shuren's men attack Kenoa's vanguard force with flaming arrows. As his forces continue their assault, he prepares to face the man himself, while on the other side, Kenshiro, Bat, and Lin eventually arrive at another town and befriend a gentle giant named Fudo after saving him from a group of thugs. Shuren attacks Keno with his passionate flame fist, but is beaten down, and then uses his ultimate technique, which causes him to be engulfed in flames, as he sacrifices his life to defeat Keno, but fails in his attempt. Ken, Bat, and Lin continue on their way, now accompanied by Fudo, who appears to have star-shaped tattoos on his arm. Kenoa's forces counterattack and wipe out Shuren's Flame Brigade. Meanwhile, Kenshiro and his companions arrive in the next town, where Fudo is revealed to be one of the 5 Chariot Stars, as he secretly learns about the deaths of Hayui and Shuren. Later, on the trail, Ken challenges a gang of bandits led by a man named Gokur and kills all but Gokur and 3 others, who then combine to use their Taizen Ryu Shisoka Ken, Mount Tai style 4 bundled fists style, but are defeats as well. Fudo reveals that he is of the mountains and has been charged with taking Ken to the last general of the 6 sacred fists of Nanto. Meanwhile, Juza of the Clouds receives a request from Rihaku to halt Kenoa's advance. but he has little interest in becoming involved in any conflict. Ken agrees to accompany Fudo south while Dalko, a bandit leader, captures a group of women, but is killed by Juza, who takes the women with him. Elsewhere, the group face bandits pretending to be Kenoa's men, but they only cause a short delay, and at Juza's castle, Rihaka's agents attempt to persuade Juza to join the last general's cause. Kenoa's agents locate the capital of the South Star with Rihaku in charge, and Kenoa decides to march his troops south to the capital, with only Juza standing between them. Meanwhile, his agents again attempt to persuade Juza to fight, but he would rather spend time in his pool surrounded by beautiful girls. Fudo also receives the news, but encounters Kenoa's motorcycle-riding Lance Squadron led by Yakuba, which cause another delay on their mission to South Star. Juza recalls how he fell in love with Yuria, only to find that she was his half-sister, and he is interrupted by the arrival of Gelza, a bandit that has come to his castle to reclaim his women. However, Juza destroys him with his unique self-taught fighting style. He refused to join the fight to defend the last general of the South Star as Kenshiro and his friends find themselves at a village ruled by Dolphy. Assisted by his assassin Zenda, who oppresses the residents by giving them a false sense of democracy. However, Ken forces Zanda to vote for Dolphy's execution, and later, at a party at Juza's castle, Rihaka's daughter, To, drugs him and he is taken to the last general's castle where she reveals her identity to him, and Juza swears to fight for her. Kenoa's forces and Kenshiro both head towards the capital of the South Star while Juza and his men prepare to stop him. Kenshiro and his friends attempt to find a way to cross a bridge which is under the surveillance of Kenoa's men, and they travel in a hay cart with Bat dressed as a cute girl. But the deception is discovered and Ken has to fight the men. Elsewhere, Juza and his gang intercept Kenoa, who is surprised to see that Juza has regained his will to fight. Juza engages Kenoa, and appears to have the technique to stop him, while elsewhere, Kenshiro faces Genemi, an assassin who seeks to make Ken his 10,000th victim. However, the latter forces him to become a victim of his own twin swords. As Juza and Kenoa fight, he recalls when they were both training and Juza's talents rivaled his own. Suddenly, during a staged attack, Juza hijacks Kenoa's steed Kokoro and flees the battle as his gang ambushes his forces, slowing his advance. But as Juza rides on, he realizes that he has been wounded. Kenoa is fitted with a new uniform and orders his agent Zaku to delay Kenshiro and forces catch up with the group. But Fudo stays behind to delay them while Ken continues south. Concerned at the delay, Zaku's right-hand man Hilka kidnaps two of Fudo's adopted children, Danji and Jiro, throwing them into a bottomless quicksand pit in an attempt to force him to enter the quicksand himself to rescue them. Fudo is caught in a quicksand pit with two of his orphans, and when Ken is told of his predicament, he is forced to make a choice between continuing on to the Nanto capital or helping Fudo, and decides to go to the rescue. Hilka and his men use their Taizen Yoken, Mount Tai Bewitching Fist, style to attack him, but Ken is too powerful and defeats them all. Juza prepares to continue their battle while Kenshiro, Fudo and the children return to the village, but as they arrive, Fudo collapses from arrows fired into his back by Hilka's men at the quicksand pit. Juza returns to Kenoa, removes his restrictive armor and attacks using his special technique. Although he wounds him, the latter is too strong and grasps Juza in a fatal hold. Back at Fudo's village, Fudo is too injured to accompany Ken to the Nanto capital and finally tells him that the true identity of the last general of Nanto is none other than Ken's fiancée, Yuria. He reveals how the Nanto 5 chariot stars saved Yuria, who had survived the destruction of Southern Cross, and they gained Shin's approval to protect her from Kenoa, before Shin took the blame for her death. Ken then rushes towards the Nanto capital with greater urgency to protect her, while Juza refuses to reveal the identity of the last general to Kenoa and fights until he is finally killed and granted a gracious burial. Following his death, Kenoa deduces that Yuria is the last general, and he and Ken separately race against each other to reach the Nanto capital. Rihaka tells his daughter To about Hokuto Shinken, the deaths of Jagi and Toki, and the history between Kenshiro and Kenoa. Ken faces the Shadow Brigade, while Kenoa advances alone and enters Yuria's castle first. However, instead of finding the last general, he encounters To, who is masquerading as Yuria. She declares that she has loved Kenoa ever since he saved her from a pack of wolves when she was a young girl, but he only had eyes for Yuria. Spurned by Kenoa, and rather than reveal Yuria's location, To kills herself. Just as Ken arrives at the castle, just as Keno declares that Yuria will suffer subjugation or death. Yuria attempts to escape from her castle in order to be reunited with Ken, while Rihaku challenges Keno. However, Ken decides that he must confront Keno before, fearing that Yuria's life might be in danger as long as Keno lives. He finally meets him and seems to have renewed strength, attacking Keno and avoiding his counterattacks by incorporating the fighting styles of his former comrades. Keno suspects that Ken has acquired the ultimate secret technique of Muso Tensei, no thought rebirth, through experiencing sadness, and for the first time in his life, Keno experiences true fear. Overwhelmed by Kenshiro's newly discovered technique of Muso Tensei, he recalls how Ken's empathy for others may have made him stronger. Keno is willing to accept death through mutual destruction, however, he accidentally triggers one of Rihaku's booby traps and the floor collapses beneath him. He emerges from the wreckage and stumbles into Yuria before he abducts her and rides off. While Ken is shown to be blinded by his battle, he decides to pursue him and rescue Yuria. Keno recovers after being treated by Yuria, which causes him immense shame and to reject his identity, reverting to the name of Ryo and calling himself the Demon King. Meanwhile, the blind Kenshiro continues to seek and rescue Yuria but is ambushed by Jado and his bikers to prevent him from reaching his destination, yet he still manages to destroy them. Ryo recalls the time he beat Ken as a promising but inexperienced student, and how Toki predicted that one day Ken would threaten him. Haunted by nightmares of his near defeat by Ken, Ryo seeks to overcome this by fighting Fudo, the only fighter he ever feared, and rides to his village to issue a challenge. The gentle Fudo is shown in the past to have been a terrifying bandit until he learned the value of life from a young Yuria. He is challenged by Ryo, who threatens to kill the children if he refuses to fight, causing him to reluctantly accept the challenge and dons his old armor, and Ryo orders his men to fire arrows into him if he retreats during the battle. Kenshiro reaches Ryo's lightly defended castle and discovers that he has left to fight Fudo. While back at the village, Ryo slowly gains the upper hand in his fight but takes considerable hits himself, but Fudo's courage and love for his children allows him to persist further in battle. On his way to the village, Kenshiro is again stopped, this time by a group of Kenoa's Buddhist monks, but he defeats them without killing. As the battle between the two continues, Ryo momentarily retreats, causing his forces to shoot a giant arrow which pierces Fudo, and as he lies dying, he warns Ryo that Ken will defeat him. Ryo then berates his own men for shooting and causes them to flee until Ken finally arrives as Fudo succumbs to his injuries. At his funeral pyre, Rihaku, the sole surviving member of the Five Chariot Stars, reflects on the sacrifices of his comrades as they fought Ryo to protect Yuria, while on the other side, Kenshiro regains his sight. Ryo loses the respect of his men after rampaging against them, and they defy him to protect Yuria, who cared for them. He prepares to kill her, and although he realizes that he may love her, he strikes her and then sends Koko to fetch Kenshiro. Koko takes Ken to Hokuto Renkitoza, the holy training ground of Hokuto Shinken, for his final confrontation. Ken meets Ryo at Hokuto Renkitoza, and the latter shows Yuria's lifeless body, the woman he apparently killed to bring sadness to his soul. He reveals that he too has mastered Muso Tensei, making him evenly matched with Kenshiro, and their battle rages, trading blows of savage intensity, until they both prepare to exchange their final blows. Ken breaks through Ryo's defenses and finally delivers a fatal blow, and the death-omened star shines as Ryo begins to die. It is revealed that Ryo did not kill Yuria because she was already dying from an illness, and that he only struck a pressure point to place her in a death-like state, and it is also revealed that his intervention has extended Yuria's lifespan from a few months to several years. Parts of Kenshiro's life are shown, from the day he first met Yuria as a child as well as his journey to the final battle. As he dies, Ryo bids farewell to Kenshiro, while Yuria slowly regains consciousness, and the two leave to finally be together. The army of the Tenti, Celestial Army, is expanding its territory through threat and oppression, and citizens are press-ganged into manually creating energy in the imperial capital, making bright light for Viceroy Jacko to counteract his fear of darkness. A gravestone set up for Kenshiro acts as a trap for two side-wielding Tenti assassins, who kill anyone visiting the site, while Bat and Lin lead a Hokuto rescue party to save the men abducted by the Tenti army, to work as slaves in the imperial capital, but the men are burned to death before they can be set free. Meanwhile, a mysterious bearded drifter wanders into a poverty-stricken town and collapses. Gelly, the new Tenti enforcer, searches a town for remnants of the Red Dragon Party, resistance movement that once opposed the Tenti's army in the past. He finds Mahari, a former Red Dragon Party leader and the father of Maru who helped the bearded stranger. However, the stranger defends the townspeople against Gelly, and he is finally revealed as Kenshiro after he uses his Hokuto Shinken and destroy them. Ken then visits his tombstone where he disposes of the two assassins who killed people, then single-handedly attacks one of the Celestial Army outposts, and the survivors flee to a town run by Basque. Meanwhile, the executioner Barone captures a young couple who are mistaken for Lin and Bat, but Basque decides to execute the woman as Lin anyway until Kenshiro arrives riding Kuko and fight his way to kill Barone and Basque, before finally reuniting with a tearful Lin, Bat and Rihaku. Ken decides to join their cause, giving the Hokuto army a needed boost in morale, and Jacko places a bounty on his head as a man named Ein decides to take up the offer, beating up the other contenders. However, after Ken beats him, the giant bounty hunter Buzori ridicules Ein, who then angrily defeats the overconfident giant with one punch. Kenshiro then visits the obese Imperial Captain Gaira, who tries unsuccessfully to hypnotize Ken, who then kills him. To draw Kenshiro into battle, Viceroy sends Solia of the Purple Light to Mamiya's village where he kills the Elder and prohibits any reference to the North and South Stars. As Bat and Lin take their forces to free the last section of the western area, Ken rides into Mamiya's village and finds it devastated and faces Solia, a master of Gento Koken who has been ordered to annihilate anyone associated with the Hokuto and Nanto schools. Meanwhile, Bat finds Haz and Gil, the Harn brothers, encased in a concrete block within the prison, and decides to take them with him. Back at the village, Ken suffers some injuries in his fight with Solia, but still manages to defeat him, and while attempting to catch up with Bat and Lin, he is confronted by Shoki of the Red Light, a man who once helped Kenshiro by allowing him and Yuria to live in his village. However, he is no match for Ken, whom he allows to pass. Meanwhile, Bat and Lin lead a desperate battle against the Golden General Falco, the strongest of the Gento warriors, who easily defeats the Hokuto army, and to save the others, Bat claims that he is their leader. However, Falco identifies Lin as the one they follow. Just when Falco is about to execute her in front of her supporters, he is challenged to combat by the Harn brothers, who are seeking revenge for killing most of the Nanto Seiken masters. Meanwhile, Ein tries to lure Kenshiro into one of his traps, but he dismisses him as a nuisance. Although very strong, Haz and Gil are no match for Falco, and they attempt to explode a bomb to destroy him, but his men surround him, sacrificing themselves so that he can survive. Commander Baron asks Ein to lead the bounty hunters against Ken, but he refuses, preferring to work alone, and he meets Bat, who convinces him to switch sides and join the Hokuto army. Later, they attack Baron's stronghold, and Baron decides to take revenge by kidnapping Ein's little lady Asuka. Surprisingly, Ken comes to Ein's aid, who takes his revenge on Baron for threatening Asuka, the child of the woman who saved his life. As Ken and the Hokuto army approach the imperial capital, he learns about how Falco sacrificed his right leg to save his village when threatened by Kenno and his army. Meanwhile, in the capital, Shoki is punished by Viceroy for not destroying Ken, and when he also beats Falco for insubordination, Shoki attacks, accusing him of misrepresenting the Celestial Empress. However, Falco defends Jacko, apparently killing Shoki, but then helps the wounded man to escape the capital, only to be seen by Jacko and his minions, Taiga and Bolts, who spears the wounded Shoki. The latter dies, but not before he tells Ken that Jacko is the real enemy, causing him to retrieve the spear and swears vengeance against Bolts. Jacko has a nightmare in which he is threatened by Ken, then awakes to find him and the Hokuto army at the gates of the imperial capital. Gentle warrior Bolts attacks with his Source Star 100,000 spears of light, but Ken is unimpressed and destroys him, avenging Shoki. Inside, Falco regrets not killing the cowardly Jacko years earlier, as he now has the Celestial Empress captive and threatens to kill her if Ken is not stopped. Meanwhile, Ken fights his way into the capital, but pauses just as the other hands a detonator to his lover Miya in order to destroy the imperial capital if he loses, and then goes out to engage Kenshiro in a battle to the death. While the two fight, Lin senses that the Tenti is calling out for her and enters the imperial capital along with Bat and Ein. Jacko discovers that Miya has the detonator and orders her killed, but she is protected by Saya, one of Falco's men. Suddenly Lin and her companions arrive, But Jacko is protected by green light taiga and he drops them into a pit below. There, they meet the Celestial Emperor, who's actually a woman with a strong resemblance to Lin, and it is revealed that she's her twin sister. Years ago, when they were still babies, Jacko originally ordered Lin killed, but Falco saved her instead when he couldn't bear to end her life. And although she is blinded from years trapped underground, as Jacko kept her imprisoned to coerce Falco to obey him. Empress Louis embraces her sister Lin. Meanwhile, outside, the brutal battle between the North and Source stars continues. Jacko collapses the roof of his dungeon to kill those below, but Ein protects the others with his body. While outside, Kenshiro and Falco are both of them injured, exhausted, and their defenses weakened. Ken manages to make a winning strike, but holds back, not wanting to kill Falco as they fight to a standstill. Underground, the fatally injured Ein entreats Louis and Lin to stop the battle between Ken and Falco, and uses his remaining energy to help the group break out. Jacko orders his men to shoot down the two with huge metal arrows, but Kenshiro and Falco's men protect their leader. The former catching the arrows, but with the latters using their bodies as shields, sacrificing their life. Ein finally frees the underground group and they emerge to see the warriors, only for Ein to collapse and dies from his efforts. With the rescue of the Celestial Empress at the expense of Ein's life, Kenshiro and Falco stop their fight and turn their attention towards Jacko, who declares himself Celestial Emperor. With his soldiers defeated, even Green Light Taiga abandons him and Jacko then tries to flee for his life. However, Falco finally confronts and destroys him. Meanwhile, Lin re-enters the capital complex to rescue the survivors, but is captured by Taiga, who detonates explosives, destroying the structure, but escaping with Lin through flooded tunnels. As the Hokuto group bids farewell to the dead Ein, Taiga and the remnants of Jacko's forces prepare to travel with Lin across the Sea of Death to another land. As Lin is kidnapped and taken with the remnants of Jacko's across the Sea of Death to the kingdom of Shura, Falco sets off alone to rescue her, and Kenshiro follows. On the way, Ken is attacked by pirates, and he overcomes them and convinces Captain Akashachi to sail to Shura after the crew desert him. Falco arrives on Azura and sees the remains of Taiga and his men on the beach. After defeating one Shura attacker, he heads inland as Captain Akashachi tells Ken how years ago, one young Shura warrior killed his crew of 100 men, left him crippled, and took his young son. Ken goes ashore, and after defeating two Shura who attack him, he finds Falco severely wounded from an encounter with a single warrior who now confronts him. Falco asks Ken to use Seketsuko to restore his energy for one last battle, wanting to die with honor, and he engages the nameless warrior and manages to defeat him, expending his remaining energy. Meanwhile, Lin is taken into a stadium, before the regional leader Kaiser, where two men fight to the death to claim her as their bride. However, Kaiser sends the victor off to deal with Ken before he can wed Lin. As Falco lies dying, a carrier pigeon delivers a message that Miu is pregnant, thus providing a successor to the Imperial Fist of the Source Star. Kenshiro reaches the gates of Shura and faces Alf of the Hourglass. However, the contest is over quickly and he advances into the city. A small figure in rags takes Lin out of the city, where they encounter in Shura Guard before he removes his disguise to reveal him as a Rakshasa, an exponent of the North Star Lapis Lazuli Fist Hokuto Ryuken style. Kaiser and his troops arrive, and he accepts the Rakshasa's right to take Lin by force, just as the Rakshasa says his real name is Shachi and he challenges Kaiser. Meanwhile, Kenshiro saves a boy from two Shuras who thinks that he is the North Star fighter Shachi, whom Ken realizes is the son of Captain Akashachi. The boy Tao takes him to visit his sister Leia's school for children, where she teaches forbidden topics like love and friendship, and Kenshiro learns how Shachi has forsaken her teaching to pursue Hokuto Ryuken. Meanwhile, the latter challenges and kills General Kaiser, while Ken learns that Sachi has captured Lin and is probably heading to challenge Han, the third general of Shura. Shachi reflects on how he was prepared to leave Shura and find his father, but returned to protect Leia, and he now plans to conquer the Shura and use Ken to eliminate the Rasho, the three main rulers. His first target is Han, who also practices Hokuto Ryuken, and Shachi presents Lin while disguised as a lowly rag. But Han sees through the disguise. His initial attack fails, so he withdraws, leaving Lin for Han. However, Ken has already arrived and sits on Han's throne before the two attack each other, and the battle rages on the snow. Kenshiro and Han trade blows faster than the eye can see, and Shachi tells Lin how he abandoned Leia and the path of peace to begin his Hokuto Ryukin training after meeting Ryo, but is horrified when Lin says that Ken defeated him. Shachi tells her how Ryo easily defeated a large number of bandits, vowing to defeat his two brothers in arms before leaving to conquer Shura, while Kenshiro appears to defeat Han, and because of Ryo's invincible reputation within the commoners of Shura. Shachi announces that Ken is Ryo. With this news, red dye is released into the rivers, causing word to spread through Shura that the savior Ryo has arrived. Due to this manipulation, fear is brought to Shura, but joy to the villagers, and Leia and her brother Tao visit Jukiai, the Hokuto Ryukin master who trained the three Shura rulers, and Shachi. He reveals that Shura is Ryo's birthplace, and that Jukiai sent Ryo, Toki and Kenshiro across the sea to train under Ryukin to master Fist of the North Star. Meanwhile, Han realizes that Ken is not Ryo, and tells him that he was born in the kingdom of Shura, while Jukiai is surprised to learn that it is Ken who has arrived. The titanic battle between the two continues, causing massive destruction until Kenshiro eventually wins when Han falls to his death. Later, Ken signals Captain Akashachi to pick up his son Shachi and Lin, but they both decide to stay in Shura. As false rumors of Ryo's arrival spread through the land, a group rags led by a follower of Ryo named Kozum leads a raid on a Shura training camp to rescue his young son Chin and others from indoctrination. However, the ruthless Shura, Baran, puts down the attempted rebellion, telling them that Kenshiro is not Ryo, while the latter takes time to reflect on what happened since his arrival, and later comes across the villagers massacred by Baran and forces the man to kill himself with his own swords. The Shura kingdom is caught in the grip of violence as the people punish anyone who resists their control. Ken encounters Rock, Kozum's elder son, who has decided to carry on Ryo's legend with his band of 6 cowboys to form the new army of Ryo, but they are confronted by the crab-like Shed during a raid on the Shuras, until Kenshiro arrives and takes care of the monster. However, he is despised for raising false hope of salvation in the population. Meanwhile, Han's body drifts downriver into the stronghold of Hyle, second general of Shura, who swears vengeance on Kenshiro. Following the death of Han, Gammon the Scorpion plans to take his place as the third general of Shura and takes a group of villagers hostage to force Rock into fighting Ken. However, the latter saves them all, and Rock accepts that he may be the savior they need. Hyle mobilizes his forces, vowing to avenge Han's death, while Rock tells Jukiai that he and his men will challenge Hyo's army. But Jukiai says they cannot win, and that Hyo was Kenshiro's compassionate older brother whose memory he removed so that he would survive in the violent Shura kingdom. Rock and his men confront Hyo's army, but they are outnumbered, and after the initial surprise attack, they are killed with only Rock escaping, telling Kenshiro that Hyo is his older brother, then dies from his injuries. Jukiai travels to Hyo's fortress in an attempt to restore his memories of his younger brother Ken. Meanwhile, Shachi delivers Lin, daughter of the Celestial Emperor, to Kao, the supreme ruler of Shura. Elsewhere, Game Leo tries to stop Ken from reaching Hyo using his camouflage abilities, but provides only a slight interruption. Jukiai attempts to unseal Hyo's memories, but he resists, and as they battle, some memories of the past return to Hyo. Meanwhile, Ken fights his way past Shura warriors and into the castle to confront Kao himself, only for the latter to immobilizes Ken and blasts his defenseless body while Lin helplessly looks on. He takes severe punishment from Kao, who reveals that he can only be beaten if the seal of the North Star is broken, which is overheard by Sachi. Meanwhile, Hyo's battle with Jukiai draws to a climactic conclusion as Jukiai fails to restore his memories and realizes that Kao placed the seal on Hyo's memories to protect himself, just as the other defeats Kenshiro and plans to crucifying him in order to end the Hokuto Shinken lineage. As Leia and Tao take Jukiai's body for burial, they are attacked by a band of Shuras. But Akashachi and his band of pirates come to their rescue. Ken is about to be publicly crucified by Kao to end the Hokuto Shinken lineage when Shachi intervenes to save him. He is defeated, but Akashachi and his band of pirates come to Kenshiro's rescue, pouring acid over Kao, and although Akashachi is mortally wounded, he reunites with his long-lost son Shachi before he dies. Following his burial at sea, Kao reappears. Akashachi's surviving men create a diversion to distract Kao so that Shachi can escape with Ken, whose heart has stopped. However, Kao tracks them down, and Shachi takes a beating to protect Kenshiro. Just as Kao is about to deliver a fatal blow, his evil fighting spiritual energy dissipates, apparently deflected by the spiritual energy of Kenshiro's Hokuto Shinken, and they escape. Keiwa's men search for Lin, but she is rescued by Sayaka, Keiwa's sister and Hyoa's fiancé. Meanwhile, Hyo approaches Keiwa's fortress to visit Sayaka, and Shachi, dressed as a rag dragging Kenshiro in a metal coffin, is intercepted by Keiwa's men. He is disadvantaged by his injuries from Keiwa, but is saved by a small mysterious man called the Black Yuksha. Later, Shachi has a chance encounter with Hyo, and Shachi sacrifices his left eye to Hyo as an offering to allow him to continue, and the latter detects something familiar about the man in the coffin. Shachi reaches his former training ground beside a waterfall, now wearing his dead father's eye patch, and when Kane, a Shura who seeks to succeed the deceased Han as the third general, finds him, Kenshiro awakens at last and destroys him along with his men. When Keiwa hears of Hyoa's approach, he surprisingly kills his own sister Sayaka. As Hyo approaches the fortress, Keiwa hands him Sayaka's body and tells him that Ken murdered her, causing the latter to swear to kill Kenshiro. Meanwhile, the morbidly obese Gyoko, traveling in his road train, also plans to kill Ken for a chance to become the third general of Shura, and as his train crashes through a village, he encounters the man himself, who forces the train to a standstill. Kenshiro then destroys Gyoko along with his men after swearing to annihilate Keiwa and all who support him, while at Sayaka's funeral pyre, Hyo pledges eternal allegiance to Keiwa, furthering Keiwa's plan for the Hokuto Shinken brothers to destroy each other. Following Sayaka's funeral, Hyo has become a demon under Keiwa, destroying anyone who opposes him and causing Nagato, Hyoa's right-hand man, to turn against his former master. Nagato encounters Kenshiro with the ailing Shachi and offers them shelter, sacrificing his and the lives of his villagers' life to defy Hyo. However, Ken and Shachi intervene to stop the slaughter of the remaining villagers before leaving to confront his older brother Hyo, who is forcing captured villagers to drain a swamp to expose the Reisidan temple and birthplace of Hokuto Ryukin. Kenshiro arrives, but Hyo is challenged first by Black Yuksha, a guardian of the Hokuto Soke bloodline, and defeats him before he and Ken begin their final battle. With Keiwa hoping that they destroy each other and end the Hokuto Shinken clan, the fierce battle between the two continues while Shachi and Black Yuksha look on in horror while Keiwa reveals his true identity to Lin as Reiwa's biological brother, and the one who sealed away his memories. Hyo painfully regains some of his childhood memories of Kenshiro. However, Shachi wounds him and stops the fight, allowing time for Hyo to fully regain them, and the brothers reconcile. When Keiwa learns of Shachi's intervention to prevent Kenshiro and Hyoa's mutual destruction, he offers a reward for his capture. Meanwhile, Shachi leaves the two and travels alone to Teiseidan Temple to unlock the secret that could allow Kenshiro to defeat Keiwa. On the way, he finds Leia in the wasteland, and they travel on together until Keiwa finds them and quickly injures Shachi, ignoring the pleas of Leia and Lin. Suddenly, an underground entrance to the Teiseidan Temple appears with light and sound that stops Keiwa in his tracks, and in an underground chamber, they see a statue of a woman, symbol of the Hokuto Shinken clan, which begins to shed tears, appearing to revive Shachi. He makes a valiant last stand to defend Leia from Keiwa, who leaves with Lin, and a short while later Kenshiro arrives. The statue shatters, revealing a pillar, and he hears a voice that, upon touching the pillar, the words from the creator of the Divine Fist of the North Star reveal the hidden technique to him, and Shachi finally succumbs to his wounds and dies. Keiwa rides with Lin to the boiling magma swamp of demons and site of the Pillar of Evil, seeking to recharge his fighting spiritual energy. When Kenshiro arrives for their last fight, he describes the death of his mother while saving Kenshiro and Hyo when they were children, which caused him to abandon all love and affection, embrace evil, and seek revenge against the Hokuto Shinken clan. The two begin to battle, and Ken surprises Keiwa by landing blows on him. However, he recovers and strikes the Shikenhaku pressure point on Lin that causes her to fall unconscious and then to fall in love with the first person she sees when she awakens, before he then savagely attacks Kenshiro. The two begin their final battle while Black Yuksha tells Hyo that Ken has found Keiwa, who then relates the story of years ago when he was chosen to be the successor to the Hokuto Shinken over the much stronger Keiwa, adding to his bitterness. Suddenly, Hyo comes under attack from the assassin Zebra seeking his bounty, but even while injured he is able to defeat him. Meanwhile, the Shura warlord Samet is looking for a wife, and comes across the unconscious Lin on Kyo's horse while back at the Swamp of Demons. Kyo and Kenshiro appear evenly matched. Kyo causes Kenshiro to fall into an underground chamber full of toxic gases designed to sap his ability to fight and attacks him. Meanwhile, Hayo rescues Lin from Samet, but covers her eyes so that she sees no one. Ken neutralizes Kyo's ability to resist the toxic gases and they both leap from the chamber, and their battle continues above ground. Ken suddenly notices on Kyo's left temple the birthmark of the Big Dipper and reveals to him that he is in fact descended from a branch of the Hokuto Soke bloodline based on what he learned about its tragic history from the pillar in the Taisiden temple. Hayo, accompanied by Black Yaksha, is confronted by Kyo's elite infantry in the desert, and they manage to defeat them, but Black Yaksha dies from his wounds just before a second wave of the army arrives. Meanwhile, the tide of battle turns between Ken and Kyo as he uses techniques he learned from his many battles to break through Kyo's defenses, and back in the desert, Bat and the Hokuto Shinken army arrive to save Hayo and Lin. Hayo, Bat and Rihaku bear witness to the final battle as Kyo desperately draws on his remaining evil spiritual fighting energy, but without success. He drags his damaged body to his mother's shrine, and makes one last counterattack, but fails as Ken lands a winning blow and Kyo finally accepts his defeat, calling on Hayo to finish him off, but the latter cannot bring himself to kill the man he once called brother, and instead dies from his wounds in Kyo's arms. They are then both encased in an explosion of lava, and Kenshiro decides to leave Lin with Bat to awaken his arms, and Kenshiro rides off on Koko, recalling the men he met, fought, and considered his brothers. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then consider subscribing and liking it, and don't forget to check out my merch store and Ko-Fi page. Your support will be much appreciated.